My mom said it like she was talking about groceries. We were standing in her kitchen. The clock ticked loud on the wall. I had just taken a sip of coffee when she said, "Oh, by the way, your sister will be living with you starting next month." I laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain needed a second to catch up. "What?" I asked. She didn't look at me, she was wiping the counter. Calm, casual, done deal. "Rachel's lease is ending. It makes sense. You have the space." That's when my stomach dropped. No asking, no discussion, no "are you okay with this?" Just an assumption, a decision already made for me. I felt something old wake up in my chest. Tight, familiar, dangerous. "I'm not doing that," I said quietly. The cloth froze in her hand. She finally looked up at me like I had spoken another language. "What do you mean, you're not doing that?" "I mean no." The silence was sharp, heavy. "You don't get to say no," she replied. "She's your sister." There it was, the sentence that had controlled my entire life. I set my mug down, because my hands were shaking. "I've done this before," I said, "and I'm not doing it again." Her face changed, not anger yet, something colder. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "It's temporary." That word, temporary. It had meant months. It had meant years. It had meant me losing myself every time. I shook my head. "I can't." She stepped closer, lowered her voice like she was teaching a child. "Emily, you live alone. You make good money. Rachel is struggling." I looked at her, and finally said the sentence I'd swallowed for over a decade. "She's always struggling, and I'm always the solution." Her mouth tightened. "You're being selfish." That word hit harder than a slap. Something cracked inside me, not loud, not dramatic, just final. I said no, I repeated. Her hand slammed on the counter. "You think you're better than us now." I didn't answer. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. If I didn't stop this now, I never would. I walked out of that kitchen, knowing one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this go quietly. And neither was I. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old. I live alone in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. I work full-time as a project coordinator for a construction company. Spreadsheets, deadlines, emails, problem-solving. It's not a dream job, but it's stable. And for someone like me, stability feels like oxygen. In my family, I'm the reliable one. The one who never needed rescuing. The one who figured things out early. The one my mom always described as strong. Rachel, my older sister, is 5 years ahead of me in age and a lifetime behind me in responsibility. She's emotional, sensitive, always overwhelmed. At least that's how my mom explains it. Growing up, our roles were decided without a vote. Rachel cried and the house stopped. I adapted and no one noticed. If Rachel failed a class, my mom said, "School just isn't her thing." If I failed, it was, "You know better than that." When Rachel quit jobs, it was because the managers were cruel. When I worked 2 shifts back to back, it was just expected. I learned early that love in my family came with conditions. Be helpful. Be quiet. Don't make things harder. By the time I was 18, I was managing my own money, my own emotions, my own plans. When I moved out, my mom cried like I was abandoning her. When Rachel moved back home for the second time, my mom called it transition. At 23, when Rachel moved into my first apartment for a few weeks, I told myself it was temporary, that helping her didn't mean losing myself. It took me nearly 2 years to recover from that lie. Since then, I built my life carefully. No shared finances, no spare keys, no open invitations. I learned how to say "I can't" instead of "I'll figure it out." Or at least, I thought I had. Because when my mom casually announced that my sister would be moving in with me again, it wasn't just a request. It was a reminder. In her eyes, I wasn't a person with a life. I was a solution, a backup plan, a resource that didn't get tired. Standing in her kitchen that morning, I wasn't just confronting a single decision. I was standing face to face with the role I had been trapped in since childhood. And for the first time in my life, I was seriously considering what would happen if I refused to play it. My apartment is quiet in a way that feels earned. Not peaceful like a vacation, peaceful like survival, like something I fought for inch by inch. One bedroom, beige walls, furniture I bought slowly, piece by piece, when I could afford it without checking my bank balance 10 times. A couch that still smells faintly like the store. A small kitchen where nothing is broken, nothing is borrowed, nothing disappears without explanation. I like routines. Morning coffee at the same time. Shoes by the door. Bills paid early. There are no surprises here. After leaving my mom's house that day, I came straight home and locked the door behind me. I leaned my back against it and stood there longer than I meant to, listening to my own breathing. Slow, uneven. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Mom! Then Rachel. I didn't open the messages right away. I already knew what they would say. I'd heard those words my whole life, just rearranged. You're overreacting. She needs you. Why are you being like this? I put my phone face down on the counter and turned on the sink just to hear something else. That night, I cooked dinner for one. Pasta, too much garlic. I ate standing up, staring out the window at the parking lot lights flickering on. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. A car alarm went off and then stopped. Normal life. Other people's lives moving forward without needing my permission. I thought about Rachel. About the last time she lived with me. Her clothes on my chair. Her half-finished plans. Her apologies whispered late at night, when she realized she'd crossed another line. I remembered coming home exhausted and finding her on my couch, scrolling through her phone, asking if I could cover rent just this once. I remembered the look my mom gave me when I hesitated, the silent pressure, the expectation. Family helps family. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my aunt. Your mom sounds really upset, the text read. Maybe you should just talk to her. I sat down on the couch and finally picked up my phone. The screen felt heavy in my hand. This wasn't staying between us. It never did. My mom had already started telling her version of the story, carefully edited, softened where it needed to be, sharpened where it hurt me. I stared at the unread messages, my chest tight. Something felt wrong, not just emotionally, logically. Rachel's move felt rushed, vague, convenient. And for the first time, instead of blaming myself for the discomfort, I let the question form fully in my mind. What if they weren't telling me everything? I didn't know it yet, but that question was about to change how I saw my family forever. The next morning, I woke up with that heavy feeling still sitting in my chest. The kind that doesn't fade after sleep. The kind that tells you something is unfinished. I went through my routine on autopilot. Shower, coffee, keys, shoes. But my mind kept circling back to one thing. Rachel's move didn't make sense. Her lease ending felt too neat, too convenient, like a story told quickly so no one would ask follow-up questions. On my lunch break, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I checked her social media. Not because I wanted to spy, because I needed to understand. Her last post was from 3 days ago. A mirror selfie, new jacket, caption about fresh starts, a few laughing emojis, friends commenting hearts and fire emojis. I scrolled. Dinner photos, drinks, a weekend trip I didn't recognize. Nothing extravagant, but nothing desperate either. This didn't look like someone about to lose everything. My stomach tightened. Rachel had told my mom she was barely making rent. My mom had told me she was panicking, but the version of Rachel online looked relaxed, almost carefree. I closed the app and stared at my screen. Maybe I was being unfair, I told myself. People don't post their worst moments. But something wouldn't let go. That evening, my mom called again. I let it ring out. She left a voicemail. Emily, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Rachel is fragile right now. If something happens to her, I don't know how you'll live with yourself. Fragile. That word again. Always fragile. Always one wrong move away from disaster. I replayed the voicemail twice. Not because I wanted to hear it, but because I wanted to understand what was underneath it. Fear. Not fear for Rachel. Fear of losing control. Later that night, Rachel finally replied to my earlier message. Rachel, I didn't want to stress you out. Rachel, things just fell apart really fast. I typed back. Me, what fell apart? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Minutes passed. Rachel, work stuff, housing stuff, everything. It was vague, too vague. I sat on my couch, phone glowing in the dark, feeling my pulse in my ears. Every time I asked for details, I got feelings instead of facts. And that's when it hit me. They weren't just assuming I'd say yes. They were rushing, because they needed me to say yes before I had time to think. Before I asked questions. Before the story cracked. I set my phone down slowly, my hands cold. Something felt wrong. Not loud, not obvious. Just wrong enough that I knew this wasn't about family anymore. It was about something they didn't want me to see. And whatever it was, I wasn't ready for how ugly it would turn out to be. I didn't confront anyone right away. That's the thing people don't understand. When you've spent your whole life being the reasonable one, you don't explode. You go quiet. You observe. You start noticing the gaps between words. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Rachel's messages in my head. Work stuff, housing stuff, everything. Nothing concrete. Nothing verifiable. Around midnight, I opened my laptop. I told myself I was just going to check one thing. I searched Rachel's name along with her company. The result came up faster than I expected. A public post in a local job search group, 3 weeks old, looking for part-time work ASAP, recently let go, open availability. My chest tightened. Let go. Not laid off. Not downsized. Let go. I clicked the profile, it was her. Same photo, same username. 3 weeks. She hadn't lost her job suddenly. She'd been hiding it, long enough to line up a new place to land. The mate. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my heart thudding like I'd just run upstairs. A memory flashed through my mind, my mom, a few weeks earlier, asking casually if I was still comfortable financially. At the time, I thought she was just making conversation. Now it felt rehearsed. I checked my messages, scrolled back further than I meant to. Rachel asking if I still had the spare room. My mom asking about my lease renewal. Both of them circling. Then something else hit me. If Rachel had been unemployed for weeks, how had she been paying for dinners, trips, new clothes? I opened my bank app. Transfers. Old ones, recent ones. A $300 emergency she'd asked for last month. A $150 short-term loan. My mom's name next to several withdrawals I didn't remember agreeing to, money I'd sent after tearful phone calls, after vague explanations. My hands started to shake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. They hadn't asked me if Rachel could move in. They had counted on it, budgeted for it, decided it was happening before I ever knew there was a problem. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark, my breathing shallow. The betrayal didn't come from one lie. It came from how coordinated it all was. How normal it felt to them. How familiar it felt to me. I thought about all the times I'd been told, "You're the only one who can help." All the times I'd believed it. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt angry. And beneath that anger was something sharper. If they were willing to lie this easily, what else had they been hiding from me all these years? I wasn't ready for the answer. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down anymore. I didn't tell them what I knew. Not yet. I've learned that when people think you're still confused, they get careless. They keep talking, they keep lying, and every lie leaves a trail. So I played my old role for a few days. Quiet, polite, non-committal. I just need time to think. I texted my mom. Things are overwhelming right now. I told Rachel. They both relaxed instantly. That alone told me everything. Late at night, after work, I started going through things I hadn't looked at in years. Old messages, email threads, bank statements, notes I'd written to myself when something felt off but I didn't want to believe it. I noticed patterns I'd ignored before. Rachel's emergencies always showed up right after she posted about a night out. My mom's guilt-filled calls always came when Rachel had burned another bridge. And every time I hesitated, the language escalated. She's not well. She might hurt herself. You don't want that on your conscience. Fear, that was the lever they used. One night, while scrolling, I found a message from Rachel dated almost a year ago. I must have skimmed past it at the time. If things don't work out, I can always stay with you again. Mom agrees. Again. They'd been planning this long before now. My chest felt tight as I realized something else. My mom wasn't just covering for Rachel. She was managing her, calling landlords, making excuses, moving money around, using my stability as a buffer so Rachel never had to fully crash. And every time I stepped in, I delayed the fallout. I remembered a conversation from years ago. Rachel had laughed, half joking. "You're like my backup life." I'd laughed too. I wasn't laughing now. I started writing things down, dates, quotes, amounts, not because I planned to confront them immediately, but because I needed to see the truth laid out cleanly. No emotion, no excuses. Just facts. One evening, my mom called while I was doing this. "You've been distant," she said. "That worries me." "I'm just tired," I replied. She sighed. "Rachel's barely sleeping. This whole thing is really hurting her." There it was again, another attempt to pull me back in. I looked at my notes. The lies, the money, the quiet coordination. And for the first time, instead of feeling pulled, I felt steady. "I'm not making any decisions yet," I said calmly. "Please stop pressuring me." She went quiet. Then sharper, "You're changing." "Yes," I said, "I am." After I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I wasn't just uncovering the truth about Rachel. I was uncovering the truth about my mother. And I knew that once I said what I'd found out loud, there would be no going back. Something big was coming. I just didn't know yet how ugly it would get. The twist didn't come with shouting or tears. It came quietly, in a way that made my stomach drop before my mind could catch up. I was at work when I got the call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, is this Emily Carter?" a man asked. "Yes, this is Paul. I'm calling about the apartment application." My heart skipped. "I didn't apply for a new apartment," I said slowly. There was a pause on his end, papers rustling. "Oh, that's strange. I have an application here with your address listed as the future residence. It says you've agreed to co-sign." My mouth went dry. "Who submitted it?" I asked. "Rachel Carter." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "She said you'd already discussed it," Paul continued, "that she'd be moving in with you while she got back on her feet." I gripped the edge of my desk. "No," I said, "that's not true. I never agreed to that. She doesn't have permission to use my address or my information." Another pause, longer this time. "I see," he said carefully. "Thank you for clarifying, I'll note that." When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at my computer screen while emails piled up unopened. This wasn't pressure anymore. This was entitlement. Rachel hadn't been waiting for my answer. She'd already acted like she had it. And my mom knew. I knew she knew. Because 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Mom, did someone call you about housing?" "Mom, Rachel is very upset. You embarrassed her." I felt something snap inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cleanly. They hadn't just assumed I'd say yes. They built plans on it, told strangers, signed papers, used my name like it was theirs. I remembered every time my mother had said, "You're strong, you can handle it." Every time Rachel had smiled and said, "I knew you'd come through." They didn't see me as a person who could refuse. They saw me as infrastructure, a place to land, a name to use, a life they could lean on without asking. I went to the bathroom at work and locked myself in a stall. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down. I wasn't sad. I was furious. But underneath, the anger was something colder and clearer. If I let this slide, if I explained gently, if I forgave quietly, this would never stop. They would keep taking, until there was nothing left of me but function. When I got home that evening, I didn't collapse on the couch. I opened my laptop. I pulled up every screenshot, every message, every bank transfer. I organized it. Not to threaten, not to scream, but because for the first time in my life, I understood something terrifying. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And the only way out now was through. I didn't confront them right away. That surprised even me. Old Emily would have called my mom crying, demanding explanations. She would have begged Rachel to stop. She would have tried to smooth things over before anyone else noticed. This time, I wanted the truth to stand on its own. So I prepared. I made a clean folder on my laptop. No dramatic titles, just dates. Screenshots of texts where Rachel said she was between jobs. Bank transfers labeled emergency. My mom's messages urging me not to stress her. The missed rent notices Rachel had forwarded to me months ago, framed as temporary problems. And finally, the email from the apartment manager confirming Rachel had used my address without consent. It took me 3 hours to organize everything. By the end, my hands weren't shaking anymore. That night, I sent one message to the family group chat. Just one. "I'm done being discussed without being told the truth. If anyone wants to understand why I said no, here it is." Then I attached the file. I didn't add commentary. I didn't defend myself. I let the facts speak. Within minutes, the chat exploded. Questions, confusion, silence from some people who had clearly believed my mom's version. Then my mom called. I let it ring. She texted instead. "How could you humiliate us like this?" Humiliate. Not "is this true?" Not "why didn't we stop?" Just humiliation. Rachel's message came next. "You could have just helped me. You didn't have to destroy everything." I stared at the screen and felt something unexpected. Relief. Because now it was out. The fog was gone. The story wasn't just theirs anymore. I replied once. I didn't destroy anything. I stopped covering for it. After that, I stopped responding. The consequences rolled in fast. My aunt called, quieter than usual. I didn't know it was that much money, she said. A cousin messaged me privately. Honestly, this explains a lot. Rachel's tone shifted from angry to panicked. She asked if I could just help with 1 month, until things settled. I didn't answer. My mom showed up at my apartment 2 days later. She stood in the hallway, eyes red, voice shaking. "You've made me look like a bad mother," she said. I met her gaze. "You made those choices," I replied. "I just stopped hiding them." She tried guilt, then tears, then anger. None of it worked. Because for the first time, I wasn't arguing about feelings. I was standing on facts. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I simply said, "Rachel is not moving in. My finances are not available. And if my name is used again without permission, I'll take legal steps." She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I closed the door gently. That was the revenge. Not public humiliation. Not screaming matches. Just boundaries that finally had teeth. And they felt heavier and more powerful than anything I'd ever done before. After that, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something breaks, and everyone is afraid to touch the pieces. Rachel didn't move in with me. She couldn't. The apartment manager flagged her application. She had to stay with my mom. Two people who had always leaned on me were suddenly forced to lean on each other. And it wasn't easy for them. I heard bits and pieces through relatives. Rachel picked up part-time work, not something she loved, not something she bragged about, but something real. My mom complained less publicly. She stopped calling me dramatic. She started saying I was distant. I let her say it. For weeks, I waited for the guilt to crush me. It didn't. What came instead was grief. Quiet, strange grief. For the version of my family I'd always hoped would exist if I just tried harder, if I just gave more, if I just stayed softer. I grieved the idea that love didn't have to hurt to be real. Some nights, I'd sit alone on my couch, lights off, listening to the hum of the fridge. My phone would buzz with messages I didn't answer right away, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Rachel eventually sent a message. Short, careful. "I'm not okay, but I see now that I wasn't being fair to you." I didn't reply immediately. I let myself breathe first. Let myself feel without rushing to fix. When I did respond, it was simple. "I hope you keep taking responsibility. I really do. No promises. No rescues." My mom hasn't apologized. Not fully, maybe she never will. But something did change. She stopped assuming. She stopped deciding my life for me. And that strangely was enough. I still love them. That part never went away. Love doesn't just switch off because you finally tell the truth. But love doesn't mean surrender anymore. The hardest thing I learned through all of this wasn't how to say no. It was learning that saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the only thing strong enough to survive a family that was built on silence. I didn't lose my family. I lost a role. And in return, I finally got my life back. If you stayed until the end, thank you. Stories like this aren't about hate. They're about boundaries. About choosing yourself when no one else ever did. If this reminded you of your own family, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? If you want more real, emotional stories like this, subscribe and stay with me. Sometimes the hardest revenge isn't hurting someone back. It's refusing to let them hurt you again.